They didn't see it coming. Not the armed guards, not even the British government. In 66 minutes, £53 million vanished. No alarms, no bodies, no trace. At the centre, Lee Murray, a cage fighter who dropped UFC champions and then dropped Britain's biggest vault. With a crew of ghosts, a plan of surgical precision and zero hesitation, he pulled off the perfect heist. He vanished across borders, fathered a child in prison, and even tried to escape a Moroccan fortress. This isn't just the story of a fighter. It's the story of a man who rose like a legend and fell like a king. Lee Murray was born in Plumstead in 1977. His mother, Barbara, cut hair. His father, Brahim, hustled with fire in his blood and chaos in his shadow. They met on a sunny holiday in Gran Canaria. Back in London, reality kicked in, and love turned to ash. Brahim was absent during Lee's early years. When he returned in 1984, so did the chaos. Volatile, alcoholic, and eventually gone for good after one violent clash with his teenage son. With his dad gone and his mum left picking up the pieces, the streets of Woolwich raised him. Rough, loud, and completely lawless. And in that world, Lee didn't just survive. He sharpened into someone feared, respected, untouchable. But if the streets of London were Lee's classroom, then Buttmarsh Estate was his proving ground. Buttmarsh wasn't a playground, it was a forge. And what came out wasn't boys. It was weapons. Lee found his first real family in a local gang of kids who called themselves the Buttmarsh Boys. Turf wars, beatdowns, petty jobs, they weren't hobbies. They were survival drills. Small but feral, Lee fought with a wildness that earned him the nickname Alien. And a string of expulsions followed, as schools quickly realised they couldn't control a kid who answered only to chaos. But here's the thing about chaos. It either breaks you, or it builds a fighter who doesn't flinch. And Lee, he didn't just survive it, he thrived in it. But survival wasn't enough for Lee Murray. Once he'd earned his place in the streets, he wanted to own them. And that's where Paul Allen entered the frame. More than a friend, almost a shadow. And together they started making moves that would echo not just through the streets, but across all of Britain. His first conviction came early, caught with illegal substances and cannabis. But the handcuffs didn't teach him a lesson. If anything, they just made him smarter, bolder. Later, he'd even say to himself, "Some people will probably say I was a bully. Me, I went for all targets." Lee Murray wasn't just surviving anymore. He was turning street crime into rehearsal for something much bigger. Assault, theft, narcotics charges, one arrest after another. His rap sheet read like a warm-up act, but the system couldn't pin him down for long. Feltham Young Offenders was his first stint, followed by lockups in Dover and Norwich. And every time he came out, he was harder, meaner, smarter. He didn't just leave jail with regrets. He left with muscle. Fresh out of juvie, Murray juiced up, flaunted illegal money like royalty, and taunted cops so brazenly they chose to look the other way. A very dangerous man, they'd later say. And worse, untouchable. Every attempt to get inside his crew ended in dead ends. But even in a world ruled by fear and fists, there were glimpses of something softer. Long before the headlines about fathering a child in prison, Lee Murray had already shown a different side, one shaped by love, loyalty, and the kind of bond even chaos couldn't break. Her name was Siobhan, childhood sweetheart, quiet voice, steady eyes, the only calm in Lee Murray's storm. But somehow she stuck. Through the chaos, the fights, the flash, the blood money, she stayed. In December of 1998, just as London was settling in for Christmas, Siobhan gave birth to their daughter, Lily Jane. Murray was 21. A father. Fatherhood didn't slow Lee down. Weeks after his daughter's birth, a major narcotics suite took down his crew, including close ally Mark the Beast Epstein. But Murray vanished like a ghost in the smoke. By 2000, Lee Murray had traded the streets for the spotlight as a pro fighter. But the chaos that built him was already starting to tear everything apart. By 2008, Siobhan had filed for divorce, an inevitable end to a love story never built to survive the chaos surrounding Murray's life. Lee Murray could inspire fear, loyalty and love, but never hold on to it. In the cage, he wasn't just fighting opponents, but releasing everything the streets couldn't kill. After dodging a major drug bust in '99, Lee Murray didn't lay low. He walked straight into the cage. New arena, same war. His first official fight, Millennium Brawl. He didn't win. He detonated. One punch, one blink, lights out. The promoter watched in shock. The speed, the violence, inhuman. From that moment on, he wasn't Lee. He was lightning. Between 2000 and 2002, Murray dominated England's underground fight scene, winning 4 of his first 6 MMA bouts and building a name in smoky pubs and backroom cages. Mink coats, silk shirts, diamonds on his wrist. He didn't look like a fighter. He looked like the man who owned the club. Then came the night that made him a legend. UFC 38, London, 2002. Murray was not even on the fight card. But after the after party outside a nightclub, a drunken scuffle erupted. And standing on the other side was none other than Tito Ortiz, the reigning UFC lightweight champion. Most would have backed off. Murray took off his jacket. Ortiz swung first and missed. Murray answered with 5 brutal shots, dropped Tito cold. One final soccer kick to the head before bystanders pulled him back. Knocked him out, said trainer Pat Miletich. A scary son of a bitch, said UFC president Dana White. The fight was not even official, but in MMA circles, it counted. And in the cage, Murray was just as lethal. Later that year, he scored a 4-second knockout in an Extreme Challenge bout, one of the fastest KOs ever recorded. And then, Christmas Day 2003, just a month before a scheduled fight, Lee Murray was behind the wheel when a street spat spiraled into something far darker. One wrong look, one wrong word, that was all it took. He hunted the other driver down, rammed the car off the road and beat the man so badly paramedics had to intervene. The charge? Grievous bodily harm with intent. The charges didn't hold, but the US still denied his visa. And just like that, Murray's UFC dream was over. Filmmaker Pat Condolis said it best. The road rage incident, it was a huge fork in the road. If that didn't happen, the Securitas heist might never have happened. When the cage closed, Lee Murray chased the same high into the criminal world, and after a brutal knife fight in Mayfair left him with a punctured lung and a severed artery, a new, bold plan began to take shape. You'd think that would be enough to keep him away, but just a week later, he was back. Same club, different night. And this time, the violence exploded. Over 30 people, bottles, knives, fists, blood. In the chaos, Murray was stabbed deep in the chest. His coach watched him stagger away, blood spurting out from a torn artery. First they stabbed me in the head. At first I thought it was a punch. When I felt blood running down my face, I wiped it away and kept fighting. Then I looked down and blood was spurting from my chest. I knew I'd been stabbed in the heart by the blood gushing out of me. Blood sprayed from me about a metre away, he described the attack. He collapsed in the street, died 3 times on the operating table, and somehow came back. Carlton said, at the hospital, his face was bloated like a rugby ball. I knelt beside him and said, "Boy, this is one fight you have to win." Epstein. Nurses sprinted blood up the halls. He lost 8 pints and had to be resuscitated. Kamet Chavez, another friend, he died 3 times that night. When he came to, he asked for a pen and wrote one word on his chart: warrior. By early December, Murray was back in the gym, just not as fierce as before. Being to death and back changes a man, you know, said Chavez. Lying broken in a hospital bed, with his UFC dream dead and fame fading, Lee Murray began plotting not a comeback, but a job so big it wouldn't just pay out, it would make history. So here it is, the part you've been waiting for. The £53 million Securitas heist wasn't just chaos, it was a calculated masterpiece, the final act of a fighter trading knockouts for banknotes. Fresh off a near-fatal stabbing, Lee Murray didn't flinch. He aimed straight at one of Britain's most secure vaults, chasing not glory, but infamy. But Lee didn't see any obstacles. He saw an opportunity. Alongside career criminal Leah Russia, he began assembling what would become the most dangerous crew in British heist history. And it wasn't random. Everyone had a purpose. Every move was calculated. Every second of the night they were planning counted. Lee Murray, the alleged ringleader. Publicly, he'd deny it. I didn't have control over it. I weren't the one to come up with the idea. I weren't the one who knew where the depot manager lived. I weren't the one who knew what car he drove. I wasn't the one who had someone who worked on the inside, you know, he insisted. How can I be the mastermind? It was never my idea. This robbery was happening whether I was involved or not. It was going down. My role was no more than anybody else's. Yet, Lee Murray is believed to be the mastermind behind the scenes, assembling the crew, planning every move, because even kings need a right hand to do the dirty work. Here's when Leo Rusher, the recon man, came into the story. Cold, experienced, violent. He stalked the depot manager, Colin Dixon, tracked his routine, his car, his family. But to break into a fortress like Securitas, you needed more than muscle on the outside. You needed eyes on the inside. This was the job of an inside man named Amir Heisanaj, a 28-year-old Albanian working inside the Securitas depot as a security guard. His job? Wear a spy camera hidden around his belt and film the layout. Cash cages, locking doors, escape routes. Everything the crew needed, straight from the inside. And where Heisanaj watched, Jetmir Bachpapa was the one who translated that vision into action. Jetmir Bachpapa, Heisanaj's friend and translator, helped organise the footage and joined the crew on the night of the heist. Stealing millions takes more than knowing the layout. You need wheels, timing, and someone desperate enough to risk it all. Stuart Royal, 49, broke, desperate, and in deep debt, covered this. Stuart Royal was drowning in debt. His house had been repossessed, and he was crashing at his girlfriend's place when the crew called. But inside the crew, he had a key role: transport chief. He secured the vehicles and tracked down exactly where Colin Dixon lived. Still, even the best getaway plans mean nothing without backup. The kind of man who doesn't blink when things get violent. Roger Coates was the appropriate violent and volatile man. On the night of the job, he'd been armed and ready. But none of this moved without trust, and no one was more trusted by Lee than the man who'd been with him since day one, Paul Allen. Lee's lifelong right hand, a ghost in the background, coordinating weapons, logistics, possibly even the fake uniforms. He didn't enter the depot, but was there in every other way. And when it was done, he fled with Lee to Morocco. Every operation needs a safe place to hide, regroup and disappear. And for this job, it was a quiet farm in the countryside. John Fowler, a 57-year-old car dealer with a rural farm that became the crew's flop house. A hideout to prep, regroup and stash hostages. He lived a quiet life, financially comfortable, mortgage nearly paid off, and with no obvious motive to join a crew of armed robbers. But his farm played a vital role. And then there was the artist. The one who didn't carry a weapon, but made the masks for the men who did. Michelle Hogg, the stylist. She wasn't just doing the hair, she was building identities. Latex masks, wigs, makeup. She transformed these men into believable officers, the perfect disguise to gain trust, before everything went sideways. This wasn't just a smash and grab crew chasing quick cash. It was a cold, calculated operation. Kidnap Dixon and his family, force the vault open, storm the depot, and vanish before anyone could react. The tools? A Volvo for the snatch, a lorry for the loot, and a Vauxhall backup, a fake cop lights, real guns, AK-47s, vests, balaclavas, and a plan just shy of madness. By February 2006, every role was set and every second counted. And on February the 21st, with £53 million in reach, Lee Murray's master plan began with a knock at the door. February the 21st, 2006, 7 p.m. The night fell quiet, but beneath that silence, something violent was already in motion. Colin Dixon, depot manager, drove home, unaware he was being hunted, until fake police lights flashed behind him and he pulled over into the trap. Two men stepped out. One of them, believed to be Lee Murray, dressed in dark clothing, walked up to Dixon's window like he belonged there. Later, Murray explains exactly how the gang conned Colin Dixon. Once he pulled over, we got out of the car and I went to his window and said to him, "Listen, there's been a problem. I ran your number plate and it's come back with a problem with it. Can you step out of the car?" Murray continued. Then we said to him, "Listen, we're not real police. Just do as you're told. Do as we say." Obviously, we showed him we had a gun with us. Looking back on the situation, the convict admitted, if I could turn back the clock and change what I'd done, I wouldn't. Back then I was a wild man. I didn't think of the future. Dixon did as he was told, and just like that, the act dropped. A gun was drawn. The officers were imposters. Dixon was shoved into the back of a Volvo, handcuffed, his face covered. In seconds, the manager of a high-security cash depot was a hostage, and no one had any idea he was missing. Meanwhile, 8:40 p.m, back at Dixon's family home in Herne Bay, 2 more gang members were knocking at his front door. This time, one wore a full Kent police uniform, crafted by Michelle Hogg to look authentic down to the last button. Inside were Lynn Dixon and the couple's 7-year-old son, Craig. "Your husband's been in a serious accident," the fake officer said. Panicked, Lynn and her son got in the car. By the time the door shut, they were prisoners, driven to a remote farm where she saw Colin bound, blindfolded and caged in a van. "We would not survive the night," she later recalled. The horror of that moment was etched into her forever. Just before 10 p.m. at Elderden Farm, the Dixon family sat terrified, held hostages, as masked men loaded weapons and suited up. Colin had one choice: open the vault or lose his family. The plan was flawless, the pressure inhuman, and everything was going exactly to script. February the 22nd, 2006, just after 1 a.m, the final phase began. 2 vehicles, one Volvo sedan and the other a 7.5-ton Renault lorry, slipped out at Elderden Farm and rolled towards Tunbridge through the still Kent countryside. Colin Dixon sat bound, tense and terrified in the back of the Volvo. Behind him in the lorry were his wife Lynn and 7-year-old son Craig, hidden and helpless. They were 30 miles from the vault. As the town slept, the gang drove straight towards one of the most secure cash depots in the country, intending to walk in, take everything and disappear. 1:30 a.m, Securitas Depot, Tunbridge. The Volvo pulled up to the depot's secure entry gate. Dixon was yanked out of the car, still under duress, and marched to the door by a man gripping him tightly. Gun in hand, threat in the air, Colin pleaded with the night security guard. "Do what they say. They have my family." No alarms, no resistance. The watchman opened the gate, and just like that, the fortress fell. Inside the vault, 1:40 a.m. 14 employees were working the overnight shift, counting, sorting, packaging currency. They never saw it coming. 6 masked men stormed in, guns drawn, shouting commands, binding staff, parading Dixon as proof. Resist and your family dies. In minutes, one of Britain's most secure vaults was theirs. No shots fired. Total control. The grab. 1:45 to 2:30 a.m. Then came the prize. With Dixon's help and insider intel, the gang raided the vault like a machine, loading so much cash it broke their lorry's limits, leaving £153 million behind simply because it wouldn't fit. Later accounts state that the gang physically could not take all the money present. They left behind a further £153 million because they could not fit it anymore into their lorry. £153 million left on the floor. By the time the clock hit 2:30 a.m, they had loaded nearly £53 million, approximately $92 million, nearly a metric ton of banknotes, the largest cash haul in the UK history and one of the biggest in the world. The escape. 2:34 a.m. With the vault emptied, the gang locked staff in cash cages, destroyed all comms and vanished into the night. No blood, no bodies. Just silence before anyone knew a crime had even occurred. 3:15 a.m. Alarm raised 30 minutes after the robbers vanished. Someone moved. Craig Dixon, the 7-year-old, wriggled his way through the cage bars. Some say he was lifted out by one of the staff. Either way, the boy reached the alarm and hid it. Kent police were finally alerted. When they arrived, they found a scene straight out of a film. Employees still bound inside the cages, no sign of the attackers, no physical injuries. But the vault? £53 million. Gone. The Dixon family was found alive, and as Colin told the police everything, the nation woke to headlines of Britain's biggest heist. £53 million gone without a trace. No alarms, no deaths, just the shadow of a flawless crime stretching out across Kent by dawn. Detective Superintendent Paul Gladstone of Kent Police was tasked with chasing down the ghosts. A crew that had vanished into the night with nearly £53 million in cash and left behind zero physical harm, alarms and witnesses. But no escape is ever perfect. And the cracks were about to show. The first break, DNA in the dirt days after the heist. Detectives recovered the Volvo and Vauxhall used in the getaway. They'd been abandoned in the Kent countryside. Plastic handcuff ties, rolls of tape and other discarded materials were found inside. Forensics moved fast. From one of the ties, DNA was pulled from a trace of saliva. The match? Roger Coates, a known offender, and suddenly the first name in a case that had the entire nation watching. The manhunt had begun. To shake loose more leads, police offered a £2 million reward, later reported to climb as high as £4 million. Within 72 hours, it paid off. An anonymous tip led detectives to a rural Southborough garage near Lee Rush's home. Inside, $6.8 million in a duffel bag. Draft floor plans of the Securitas depot and keys to another storage unit. It was the break they needed. And just like that, Leo Rusher was no longer just a suspect. He was a target. Police tracked Rusher to Dover. He was attempting to flee the country with his girlfriend in a Volkswagen. Too late. Rusher was arrested on the spot. Within days, others began to fall. Emir Hassanaj, the inside man, busted after co-workers remembered him asking too many questions about security cameras. Jetmir, Butch Papa, found hiding in Kent. Stuart Royal, the logistics man, was arrested and muttering, "My life has been chaotic." Within 2 weeks of the heist, most of the core team was in custody. Murray and Allen had vanished without trace. But when investigators searched Murray's impounded yellow Ferrari, they uncovered a hidden phone with an audio recording of two men coldly plotting the heist, confirming the ghosts were very real. One voice says, "I don't give a f*** who goes to the door." The other replies, "I can't show my face in there. I've been in the newspapers and on telly." The voices, Leo Rusher and Lee Murray, were the smoking gun, confirming Murray as the mastermind. Over £20 million recovered in total, but more than £30 million was still missing, likely dispersed, hidden or smuggled abroad. The full picture was forming. As Interpol watched borders and headlines named him as the mastermind, Lee Murray, with millions in hand, didn't just flee, he vanished in style, leaving his crew to split the rest while he and Paul Allen slipped south towards Dover. Paul was chain-smoking the whole time. He was nervous, but Lee was cool. Too cool, one underworld contact recalled. Murray popped a CD into the stereo as they approached the ferry terminal. The song, "Diamonds Are Forever." He turned to the others and grinned. "We've done it." And with that, the two most wanted men in Britain rolled out of the country undetected. The real plan was waiting further south, a place where Lee Murray believed he was untouchable. Within a week of the robbery, Murray and Allen landed in Morocco. And this wasn't some random hideout, it was strategic. Thanks to his father's nationality, Murray claimed Moroccan citizenship on arrival, a clever move, because Morocco has no extradition treaty with the UK. In legal terms, Lee Murray had just built himself a fortress. He wasn't hiding, he was ruling. From a gold Mercedes in Rabat's wealthiest district to luxury villas, wild parties and narcotic-fueled excess, Murray lived like a king until 50 Moroccan officers took him down in public and he played his trump card, Moroccan citizenship. In June 2006, Britain submitted a formal extradition request, but without a treaty, it was a long shot. So, Moroccan prosecutors moved ahead on their own. In February 2007, both Murray and Allen were convicted, not for the heist, but for their narcotics and assault charges tied to their arrest. They were sentenced to 8 months in prison. Not long and not nearly enough. By the end of 2007, and the clock would run out unless the UK could make a move. Lightning Lee Murray might walk. The heist was history. The headlines were global. And now, the reckoning had arrived. In July 2007, the courtroom drama began. 8 suspects stood trial at the Old Bailey in London, 7 men and 1 woman. Among them, Leah Russia, Stuart Royal, Jetmir Butchpapa, Roger Coates, Emir Heisenage, John Fowler, Keith Borer and Michelle Hogg. Each of them pleaded not guilty. The charges were as serious as they come: conspiracy to rob, conspiracy to kidnap and firearms offences. The case quickly became one of the most longest and most expensive criminal trials in British legal history. Jurors were shown over 66 minutes of raw CCTV footage from the night of the robbery. Over 7 tense months, the court heard harrowing testimony, damning DNA evidence and a shocking betrayal from insider Michelle Hogg until, after 8 days of deliberation, the jury finally delivered its verdict on January the 28th, 2008. 5 men were found guilty on all major counts. Russia, Royal, Butchpapa, Coates and Heisenage were all convicted. Their expressions barely changed. Some even shook hands with an acquitted co-defendant. The youngest of them, Butchpapa, laughed as the verdict was delivered. 3 others were also cleared. John Fowler, the farm owner whose property served as the hideout, was acquitted. Keith Borer, accused of handling just over £6,000 of the stolen money, walked free, and Michelle Hogg, the insider turned state witness, had already been cleared after testifying. The next day, the chief Crown prosecutor, Roger Coe Salazar, made it clear this was no victimless crime. He reminded the court there is nothing romantic about a child being held at gunpoint by masked men. Then he handed down the sentences. Now, remember when I mentioned earlier that Lee Murray managed to get someone pregnant while behind bars? Here's what actually happened. While serving time in a Moroccan prison, Murray fathered a child with a female visitor. Moroccan authorities unofficially allow conjugal visits from well-behaved married inmates. But Murray was neither married to the woman nor known for following rules. Once officials discovered the breach, his visitation rights were revoked and he was transferred to a higher security facility. Russia, Royal, Butchpapa and Coates were each given indeterminate life sentences, with a minimum of 15 years before parole would even be considered. Heisenage, the man on the inside who gave them access to the vault, was hit hardest, 20 years behind bars. Police praised the result. Superintendent Paul Gladstone called it the outcome of an extremely complex case that had cost over £5 million to investigate. But even with multiple convictions, something huge was still missing. Actually, 32 million things. More than half of the stolen £53 million was still gone. And 2 key players, the ones who had escaped to Morocco, were still out of reach. One of them was Paul Allen. Unlike Murray, Paul Allen had no Moroccan citizenship to protect him. So in mid-2008, UK authorities extradited him from Rabat under tight security, including a private flight and armed escort. Once back in the UK, Allen faced trial. The first one ended without a verdict. The jury couldn't agree. But Allen knew the walls were closing around. In October 2009, he changed course and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to rob, conspiracy to kidnap and firearms charges. He insisted he wasn't at the depot on the night of the robbery, and the court accepted that detail. But his role in the planning and fleeing with Murray made him a major player. The judge handed down an 18-year sentence. By the end of 2009, all major conspirators inside the UK had been caught, tried and sentenced. British courts has handed out more than 156 years of prison time. But the man who had led it all, the fighter turned fugitive, was still locked in a Moroccan cell. And extraditing Lee Murray? That was off the table. In June 2009, Morocco formally refused Britain's request. Murray was a Moroccan citizen, and under local law that meant he could not be surrendered to a foreign court. That was the final blow to any hope of bringing him back. But then came the twist. Remember how I mentioned in the intro that he almost escaped the Moroccan prison? Well, here's how. In June 2009, Murray attempted to escape from prison. Reports revealed he had saw blades smuggled into his cell inside a box of biscuits. He starved himself for days, trying to shrink down enough to squeeze through the bars, but the plan didn't fail because of the guards. It failed because of another prisoner, one who resented the special treatment Murray was receiving. That inmate discovered the blades and alerted the authorities. The escape attempt was over before it started, and after that, Murray was placed under tighter security. the UK found a loophole. Morocco could try citizens for crimes abroad if done with foreign cooperation, shifting Murray's trial to Rabat. The trial was held in June 2010. Evidence collected in the UK and presented. Witnesses were called. Finally, the Moroccan court found Lee Murray guilty of his role in the Securitas heist. On June 1, 2010, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Kent police accepted the verdict, but Moroccan prosecutors appealed for a longer sentence, while Murray appealed for a reduction. Both appeals were rejected. On November 30, 2010, the Moroccan Appeals Court increased Murray's sentence from 10 years to 25. It was a decisive blow. A spokesperson from Kent Police confirmed the outcome. During an appeal in Rabat, Lee Murray had an appeal against his sentence dismissed. He was handed an additional 15 years behind bars. He was moved to Sale prison and began serving the full term, 25 years, a quarter of a century behind bars. And that was the end of the courtroom saga.